Assalamu alaikum. We are going to start our session 2. I would like to introduce myself first. I'm Dr. Bushra Qaid, the Manager of Medical Education at Saha Corporate, and I'm going to be the moderator for the second session. So I would like to welcome our first guest presenter that will do the first session, Dr. Lori Lewis. She is the Executive Director of ACGMEI. Dr. Lewis joined ACGME in 2011 as the Executive Director for the Review Committee for Anesthesiology, Preventive Medicine, and the Transitional Year. Before joining the ACGME, Dr. Lewis was the Manager of Predoctoral Dental Education and the International Accreditation for Commission on Dental Accreditation. Dr. Lewis earned a doctorate in education in higher education policy and administration from University of Minnesota, where she conducted research in faculty attitudes and practice related to program evaluation. She also has Master in Allied Health and Bachelor of Science in Medical Dietetics, both from Ohio State University. Welcome, Doctora, to the stage.
I'm setting the timer. I'm setting the timer so I don't go over, but is this working? Is this, I don't have the clicker. Okay. Is the microphone working? It doesn't seem like it is. Okay, thank you so much. Well, thank you all for having me. My name is Lori Lewis. I'm Executive Director for ACG International, which means that I know a lot of you because my job really is to work with all of you to become accredited with ACG International. So it's really an honor to be here. It's an honor to share the stage with Dr. Edgar, Dr. Al-Khattabi, all of those, and Dr. Reedy, the people that I know are going to be working a lot on what we are going to be doing in the future, which is really revising the milestones. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as I talk about the requirements that we have for the milestones. I'm going to set my timer right now so that I don't go over time. We're hoping to catch everybody up on time here. Just like Mr. Hart said earlier, all the ACGMEI requirements related to milestones are in our what we call our foundational requirements. That means that these requirements are the same for programs regardless of what their specialty is. So the milestone requirements for ACGMEI accredited programs are going to be the same for pediatrics as they are for surgery, as they are for radiology. So I think that just kind of points out how foundational we really feel that the use of the milestones can be, both not only for the learners, but also to help the curriculum in the quality improvement model that is also part of ACG&EI requirements. So here's some of the requirements. First of all, I should go back here. The first one is that this is in our section called formative assessment. So the programs must provide each of the residents and fellows objective performance evaluations based on the ACG&EI competencies and the regular evaluation of the milestones. So this is the use of the milestones really for learner assessment. The goal here is to provide a roadmap to the learners so that they know what they need to accomplish throughout their educational program. It also serves as a roadmap for the faculty so that they know what to teach and where the residents should be at various places in their program. Okay. I think we're all having problems with this today. Oops. Okay. This is another part of some of the evaluation for our requirements for the milestones, in that the program really has to document systematic evaluation of the curriculum twice a year, and it needs to be based on several items. One is the mission and aims of the program. The other are resident performance, and that includes the milestone evaluation. So this is really the other use of milestones for program improvement. So programs can actually use aggregated data from their learners and how they're performing to evaluate how the curriculum is supporting that performance. So how are individual rotations adding to the ability of the learners to develop competency? How are individual participating sites adding to the ability of the learner to be competent? Even individual faculty members. Using the aggregated data for milestones for that purpose can be really very powerful in the program improvement model. Then the CCC obviously has to use milestones, and they're using that really just one thing. I mean, it's not, the milestones are one component of the CCC evaluation. The CCC can also look in a procedural specialty at the residents' case logs. How are they making procedural minimum numbers? How are they, what is their ability to have a breadth and depth of experience in the specialty? Any incident reports would be some other things that the CCC can look at, but obviously the milestones is one of the important components in that. Okay. And the program then has to use, document in a formal systematic evaluation, the resident performance, including the milestone evaluation. Okay, let me just, is this going back? Oh, here, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so my point really is that based on the ACGMEI requirements, the milestones have multiple uses. They can be used for assessment of individual learners. They also can be used for evaluation of the curriculum. And I want to point out that this is really a balance. And ACGME right now is undergoing a process of revising the milestones. It's been about 5 or 6 years since we started the milestone project. And at that time, the milestones were based on what was being done in the United States. In the intervening time, much has been learned really about how the milestones work and how to make them as useful as possible. So we took the milestones to what we call 2.0, the revised milestones in the United States. And in December and January of this year, we began a process where we did listening sessions for various specialties to go over each of the milestones in the United States to see whether or not they would be applicable in your individual context. The purpose here is to make the milestones useful for individual learner evaluation, but also to have a standardized set of milestones, because our goal then will be to provide aggregated data back to you so that you can benchmark your program to other programs in the specialty that are ACGMEI accredited, as well as programs in the United States. So that process is going to be ongoing. We're going to have a new set of milestones for ACGMEI accredited programs within the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then we'll begin a new set of educational sessions to help everybody understand how to best use the milestones, more information on clinical competency committee, those kinds of processes as well. So I wanted to talk about some kind of common questions that we get on our from our accredited programs on our milestone requirements. We've already talked a little bit about EPAs. This is, or EPAs are really a little bit different. So I'm not going to really go into that again because I only have 3 more minutes left. But common question number 2 is how, and I get this question quite often, how are the milestones used by the International Review Committee in making an accreditation decision on your program? And the answer is that milestone assessments are not considered by the review committee when making an accreditation decision on an ACGMEI accredited program. The review committee never looks at the milestones. They never even look at the aggregated data at the present time. We want the milestones to be useful for the program, not only to help the learners improve, but also to help improve the program. So the only way that a program can get into difficulty with the milestones is if they do not report them. That would be a potential citation, but how the residents themselves or the fellows themselves are marked, that is not going to be part of an accreditation decision. Another common question, can a resident or fellow graduate if he or she has not achieved all the milestones? We do not have required minimums for milestone reporting. This is really the responsibility of the program director to determine any individual resident or fellow's readiness for graduation. That's their decision. That's all I have, and I have 1 more minute. So
Our next guest speaker again is Dr. Laura Edgar. Please, Dr. Welcome to the stage.
So because you didn't hear me talk enough already, I'm going to now talk to you a little bit more about what the milestones actually are. Because when I asked earlier, there were some of you who had not, who didn't have a clinical competency committee, which means you may or may not know what milestones actually are. Now, this time I'm giving myself less time so I know I can get it all in. But I think the biggest thing to remember with the milestone is that when we think about that level 1 through 5, right? So milestones are basically they're sub-competencies that are organized under the 6 general competencies, right? So you saw the ACGME structure previously: patient care, medical knowledge, systems-based practice, professionalism, interpersonal communication skills, and professionalism, or I'm sorry, practice-based learning. That was correct. And we have these levels 1 through 5 in the milestone. And essentially, what the milestones help us to do is to think about learner assessment as something different than a Likert scale, right? We're not putting them on a scale of 1 to 10 and saying, oh, everybody's a 7 and everybody's an 8. Instead, what we're doing is we're thinking about these behavioral anchors that are listed within each subcompetency. Now, the example I have behind me is based on clinical reasoning, right? And clinical reasoning, I like to use that because it's something that everybody needs, right? It doesn't matter if you're medical, dental, nursing, clinical reasoning is always an important thing to evaluate in any of our learners. The important thing is that level 1 is novice. This is the learner that you have to think about is stand here, don't touch that, right? Go do this. You have to be very direct with them. Level 2 is the advanced beginner. Now, the advanced beginner, quite often, when we think about our young physicians, our young residents, they make the transition from novice to advanced beginner usually pretty quickly, because the advanced beginner can do some things on their own. They can go into the room and take a history and physical, right? You've observed them a couple of times already. They've done a good job. So now you're going to let them go in there and do it. And then they're going to come back to you and report. Level 3 is where things get exciting. This is really where they start to come into their own professionally. And essentially at this point, this is when your learners are able to manage common patient presentation, perform common procedures, manage those common patient problems. Now, there's still an aspect of supervision, of course, but at this point, you essentially trust that they're being able to do these things without you having to be outside the door, right, or down the hall. At this point, this is sort of a little bit of that supervision at a distance you could think about for the confident learner. The level 4 is proficient. Now, level 4 is our target for graduation. It is not a requirement for graduation. And I think that it's really important to remember that, because sometimes, you know, we get so busy in our CCCs, one of the things that happens is that we start to think about, okay, they're ready to graduate. Oh, I better hurry up and mark them a level 4 because I want them to graduate and I want to look good to my ACGMEI review committee. Well, as Dr. Lewis just mentioned, it is not a requirement that they get to level 4. And in fact, it's better for patient care if they're going to graduate and they haven't quite achieved it, that they leave the program knowing what it is that they still need help with, where they need to find a mentor, right? In some specialties, maybe it was a level 3 in an area they're not as interested in or they're not going to practice. So, for example, in internal medicine, we have we've separated the patient care sub-competencies for inpatient and outpatient. Maybe you have somebody who's only going to be an outpatient practitioner. And so if they only graduate with a level 3 or a 3.5 on the inpatient, it's probably okay, right? They're probably going to be good enough that it's okay for them to graduate as long as they know that. Now, level 5, that's our expert level. Now, this is not where we expect any of our learners to be. The language that is listed in the level 5 is really all about those unexpected things. Remember earlier, I talked about spending more time talking about your accelerated learners, those really high achievers. Start pushing them towards these level 5s. Give them activities that can help them to achieve that, especially if they're already ahead, right? So this is where this becomes really helpful for them because you've already identified that they're doing really well. Now, it's really, really important not to fall for this trap, right? Their level, their PGY here has nothing to do with their level. You can have, now, if you have a brand new intern and they're being labeled as a level 5, that is probably not right. They're probably not experts. However, you can have somebody who's a PGY 1 that's a level 3. Maybe you have somebody in internal medicine or family medicine where previously they were a nurse, right? And then they went to med school. They're probably going to be a little higher on some of these competencies than on others, right? Than what their peers might be. So it's really important to pay attention to the language. That's the whole point, right? With the milestones are those developmental behavioral anchors. Right? That's what we want to make sure we're focusing on. And when you're scoring, because most of you still have assessment tools that probably either have 1 through 5, even if you have behavioral anchors, there's always still some number that gets in. I was talking with somebody a few minutes ago during the break about informatics, right? And one of the things that happens with informatics is things get turned into numbers. We have to make sure that when we're doing those assessments that we're not just looking at the number that was spit out, right? That says this person is by the number is a 3.726421 average, right? We don't want to look, we want to look at the actual narrative and make sure that they're demonstrating what that narrative says. Now, for those who are currently using Milestones, this should look at least somewhat familiar. This is a patient safety subcompetency. And a couple of other important things about the milestones to remember is that not only are you looking at those behavioral anchors, but when you're actually assessing the milestone, when you're selecting their level, remember that if you're selecting right here, right, you're selecting them at a level 2, you're implying that they have achieved everything in this level 2 and in level 1, right? You can't just skip. They have to actually demonstrate all of those things. Now, sometimes you have a learner who's maybe they're a 2, maybe they're a 3. Well, you could choose to give them a middle score. You could give them a 2.5. And what you're saying with that is that they've demonstrated 1 and 2, but they've also demonstrated some advanced skills, but not necessarily all of level 3. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to everybody. The other thing that you're going to see in Milestones 2.0 that's new is over here, we still have this not yet completed level 1, which remember what that means, what that implies is one of two things. It's not just that they can't do level 1, right? Because level 1 is, you know, that's pretty basic. It might mean that you have not made enough observation, right? You haven't done enough assessment to identify whether or not they're at a level 1. And that's when you would mark not yet completed level 1. For patient care and medical knowledge, we have also added another line here that says unable to assess. So that way you can then distinguish. Again, we only did this for patient care and medical knowledge, not the other 4, but you'll be able to distinguish between somebody who can't do level 1 and somebody who just you've not had an opportunity to do enough assessment. So keep that in mind with 2.0. With Milestones 2.0, and as many of you saw, and thank you to those of you who participated in those learning sessions, we had a lot of people participate from around the world, and we got a lot of great feedback on the work that has been done. The big differences between the 2 versions are that the new version, this is the same sub-competency, by the way. The one over here on the right is, or I guess your left, it was from 1.0, and this other one is from 2.0. Essentially, we've simplified the language. We've tried to take out the educational jargon. That was a big part of it, and that was really confusing for a lot of people. We also limited each sub-competency to no more than 3 rows. So like you can see this one over here, you've got a different number in each level. You've got 1, 2, 2, and then over here, you've got 3 different sub-competencies, 3 different individual milestones. You now, in each of your sub-competencies, you're going to have full developmental trajectories that take you across all the different levels. And again, there will be no more than 3 in any individual one. So we believe that it makes it a lot easier to assess. The folks in the US who have started using the new milestones have found that it is in fact a lot easier to use. They said they've told us that they've been saving a lot of time. Here's another example of one that changed. This one is from the original pediatrics. The original internal medicine, where this one sub-competency, we actually divided into 2. And again, part of it is making it easier to assess so that you can give better feedback to your learners. For your programs, Milestones 2.0 is going to go into effect in January of 2024. The new milestones will be posted the end of March, early April, and that way you will have plenty of time to start creating those shared mental models and start moving forward with being prepared. Now, we will be making visits we'll be back here. We don't have a schedule of time yet, but to help you with creating that supplemental guide that I showed you earlier today, and really talking about more of these things with your direct faculty. When you have these new milestones, start mapping it to your curriculum, start mapping it to your assessments. That is such a critical piece of it, because remember, that's what helps you build that dashboard for your clinical competency committee. Mentioned this earlier, but again, another opportunity to include those learners. Include them in these conversations about where things are assessed, with how it is that they're taught, because they can give you a lot of feedback, because remember, they're seeing all of it compared to your singular view. The supplemental guide, I didn't go through the elements of it before, but there are a couple of really important things. You've got the overall intent up at the top. that really explains what the subcompetency is. Think about it as an objective, right? So when you're writing your goals and objectives, that's really your objective. There are examples for each individual milestone that are created in here. We have assessment models or tools. So there's an idea included about how it is that you're going to assess it, curriculum mapping, and notes and resources. Now, when we come back to do this work with you, we're going to give you an example of what they've got as a general guide in the US, but we're going to want you to take and make this personal to your program. What are the examples that you are looking for in your institution? You're going to be able to list the assessment tool and which items on that assessment tool can actually map to this area. Map it to your curriculum and write what resources you would give to your learners if they were struggling, or maybe to your CCC if they're not sure that something is quite matching in the work that they're doing. The supplemental guide, by going through that process, that gives you that shared mental model that I was talking about earlier. By using this and filling this guide out, it's really going to give you that good place to start. The sample that we're going to give you is not intended to be your manual. It's not intended to tell you what to do, because each of you, even though you are the same, some of you that have the same specialty, even though you're graduating people from the same type of program, you still have differences. I can tell you that where I live in Chicago, from where I live, there are 10 hospitals within about 15 miles of my house. And they're all very different hospitals, right? There are some hospitals that focus on one type of care. There's another hospital that maybe has a big trauma and emergency program. And there's another program that is taking care of children. And so they might all have a similar program, but the patients they see are different. And so we have to make sure that we make those allowances when we think about our supplemental guides. When you create this, you're going to review this with your CCC, your faculty, and your learners. You're going to go through and, like I said, you're going to fill that whole thing out. And by spending the time at the beginning and creating that shared mental model, your CCC is going to save time. You're going to have more time to talk about those accelerated learners. You're going to have more time to identify whether or not there are issues with your curriculum or with your assessment tools. Having this shared mental model is just, you're going to be amazed when you do this work at how much easier those meetings are going to go. Again, in case you missed it the first time, here's the QR code to those resources that are available for you. Again, there's all kinds of them in there, and we're constantly adding new ones. So please go ahead and look at those. We do have 2 free assessment tools that work with your resident management systems. And these are some tools that can be on your phones. Again, one of them is direct observation and the other one is a multi-source feedback tool. If you've already got those tools, I always think of it as it's never hurts to look at another tool and see if you can glean any good ideas from it, right? Just to add to your own. So I would encourage you to look at those. Those live on your systems. Those do not come back to ACGME. Those are just for your programs. Again, this JGME supplements. And I think I have time for 1 question, 2 questions maybe. Anybody have any questions about the milestone? Yes. Oh, wait, they're coming with the microphone.
Thank you. Sam Hamdi, Chancellor of California University. I'm very pleased to hear between all the presentations that there are some issues which I think are very important, which I would like to highlight. First, feeling that the contextualization of the issue, particularly your role as issue international, that healthcare and professional education is inseparable from the healthcare system of the country and of the culture. So how to take this competency domains, frameworks with all the milestones, applying the previous and previous model all this in our own context, this is crucial.
Yes.
And the second message, I think, is that whatever we have at the moment for history, we still have to work on it, how to translate it to our culture and to our systems, even within each hospital and maybe within each Emirati. And I see that this is what Louis has been referring to that, and you have been indicating that. These are very important things, and I love what you are saying about we cannot reduce performance of human beings into a number. We have been fighting for the last 40 years about the liquor skills and confusion about we need a number. And we have to be conscious about that. So it's good to use that novice, advanced beginner, and the rubrics related to that than just a number, and we add them while they're not numbers. So I think all this which are taking place, we should take them and embrace it in whatever we're doing now. And this contextualization. So I thank you very much for this. And the last point I forgot about that our undergraduate education in medicine and in other aspects of professional education should be in alignment with the postgraduate. And this is what we are doing. The UAE competency framework for undergraduate led by our colleagues, everybody we are signing for it, has taken elements related to PCLE and incorporated because it's continuity between the undergraduate, what you call it undergraduate in our context,
yeah,
the first 5-6 years, and then the residency program. Because a lot of those things has to be embedded early by the faculty who are teaching in both sides and by the learners who become the resident. So they get used to all this when it comes when they are in the residency program or beyond. So, and I think the WMC has been working also with you on those things. So, do you have any comment on that, please?
Yes. So, so first of all, thank you. And yes, we strongly believe that it has to be in context. So from your first comment, yeah, I think that's a common refrain you'll hear from all of us. In terms of your last comments, we are actually currently working with the AAMC, which is the American Association of Medical Colleges. So it's an organization that represents all the different medical schools in the US. We are currently working with them to create not only that they have these 6 core competencies as part of their work, but we are now working on a set of sub-competencies that are part of that transition from undergraduate to graduate medical education. That is such an important transition, and quite often what we hear, I'm going to guess it might not be too different here. One of the things we hear in the US quite often is that they get to residency for that intern year and they're not really ready, right? There are gaps in their knowledge or gaps in their experience. And so we're currently working together to try to make sure that at that undergraduate medical education level, that they're getting a little bit more of that education. They're getting a few more of those experiences so that they're going to be able to transition a little bit smoother into that residency. That continuum of medical education is really critical. And frankly, I think that the milestones can serve as a really good point for that. The reason I say that is because those level ones, those advanced beginner skills that are included in most of the milestones, those are things that I hope that all of your undergraduates are achieving, right? I hope they come to your residencies and they have achieved those level ones already. And if that happens, that's fantastic. Now, at that other end, those level 5s, what's really great about that expert level, that's really that transition into practice. So maybe somebody hasn't achieved a level 5 during their residency, which again, remember, we don't expect. That's something that can then they can take with them and work to achieve once they've transitioned into their actual daily work life. And so the milestones, I think, do help with that from the undergraduate to the graduate the actual in practice work. So thank you so much for your comments. And with that, I'm going to say thank you and turn it over.
Thank you, Doctor. So our next speaker is Dr. Latifa Al-Katbi. Dr. Latifa is the chairperson of Academic Affairs Department in Ambulatory Healthcare, and she's the DIO of Family Medicine program. Dr. Latifa, she's one of the cornerstones in medical education within Saha Network. She's an adjunct professor in UAE University College of Medicine. She's qualified with Arab Board in Family Medicine, and she got a PhD degree. She is a medical educator with experience of 20 years as a faculty and program director in Al Ain Family Medicine program. Dr. Latifa, she led the AHS, which is the ambulatory healthcare, through multiple accreditation bodies in the field of medical education, namely Arab Board, Jordanian, ACGMEI, and recently the NHS Emirati Board. Also, she's an active researcher with a publication in peer review journals, and she led the project of patient-centered medical homes from 2013 until now, which is aiming to implement the best practice through unique initiatives, utilizing system change, building capacity, and EMR optimization. And she's also an active member of several national committees in the field of primary care. Welcome, Dr. Latifa.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you for inviting me to share our experience for today. It's a special day. That's the first medical education gathering of this level in the United Arab Emirates, and I thank Dr. Al-Huqani for inviting us. So I'm going to talk different from the first speakers. It's not about, from the standard point of view. It's more about experience of our program and institution. So many of what you are going to listen to is not obligatory. It's not like it's a standard, but things that it could be helpful for people going through the same journey. So of course, the main aim of residency programs is competency. So it's competency-based medical education is what is mandated now by undergraduate and postgraduate institutions. The main aim of the competency-based medical education is to organize. It's to organize the educational experience of learners. So just to start giving an idea about ambulatory healthcare service, we don't have a university. We are affiliated with the University, UAE University. We are not also part of a hospital system. We are purely ambulatory healthcare service over network in Emirati of Abu Dhabi. We have went through the ACGME accreditation since more than 10 years now, and currently the NIHS accreditation. We included as part of the ACGME accreditation the milestone reporting system, and currently also recently we have included the ABA. So the objective today is to describe the adoption of the competency-based medical education, highlighting the processes and also sharing some of the outcome. I will not go through many of the slides that I have prepared because it was mentioned before. So that's a slide that you have seen before. Just to highlight what my colleagues have highlighted is that the aim is a high quality, safe doctors that they are prepared to practice. And for that to be done, for competency to be better judged, we need a structure. So clinical competency committee, it is essential in the program because it is a part of the structure that enable you to do that. So it looks at the individual resident, it provide plans to the program director and the residents and the coordinator to follow between meetings. As well, aggregate data can be informative to the program evaluation committee and the program improvement efforts. Just before going to the details, it is a study published. The aim of the study was to see how different are the CCC committees. Probably in this room we have many programs. If we did the same survey, people they run their CCC differently, and that was found in a study in the US in the emergency medicine residency program, where 116 responded to the survey, and there was different in the membership, who chairs the CCC, voting members, how many meetings they had, and what is required, and how they completed the milestones. So this is important for you to accept that it is okay to ask your colleagues how they do their CCC, and learn from them, and as well look what's suitable to your setting the best, because partly this is maybe acceptable due to local circumstances. It may be one factor. So similar studies will be interesting in our setting. Part of the overall structure that helps you to build your competency-based medical education is to have not only the CCC is part of the structure. So we don't want everything to be discussed or in the CCC or mix things together. So you need to be very focused in your meetings to things that relate to the CCC committee. In our program, we have the BIC, the CCC. This is a standard from SCGMA and NIHS. But as well, we thought because of our special circumstances, like we have military healthcare service, academic centers, we have 6 centers. So we needed to have operation clinical experience committee and education to monitor educational and needs assessment of the residents and to follow scholarly activity. It was mentioned the role of the coordinator. I will not go in details, but that's before, during the meeting, after the meeting, what they can do. So manpower resources is important. Platform, it was not mentioned, but for us, it was not that we are able to subscribe in a platform, but we didn't find a platform that makes our life easier. Always we look to things that it can help in our work. So if Excel, email, WhatsApp reminders, Microsoft Forms do the purpose for us until now, yes, we will see what NIHS will offer and what we'll have in platform. So we'll see what will make our life easier. Now we reached the how we implemented the milestone and the EBA, the main talk of this session. Just a reminder, milestones is defined by SCGME as stage in the development of the resident competency. ABA is an essential activity that residents should have to do in specialty. In layperson expression, competency milestones are describers of the physicians, while ABAs are describers of their work. So the milestone completed 2 times a year. We were talking with Dr. Theodora. It's less likely that 2 meetings of the CCC will be enough in any program. I think it should be more, because it is more about the progress of the resident. So you don't want to have 6 months of progress that it is not followed. I know that it could be, but it is better to be within the committee. It's important also to have this milestone, the EBA. It serves different purpose according to our experience. The implementation may be labor intensive, and people may be feeling pressured and loaded with the meeting of the CCC if they hear that it is coming. But we need to make it easy and not a big meetings. So that's all on the program director and CCC chair discretion. The most important thing is that we look for tools that make us completing the milestones easier, and we found ABA to help us better. So ABA, I feel it is not a burden on our program. Instead, we felt that it helped us to complete the EBA, as we'll come to in a minute. So just a few slides, 2 slides, to let you know about our experience. I joined the family medicine program in 2002. I became program director in 2004. And ECGME, we started preparation in 2011. And in 2014, we started working with the Milestones. First accreditation of the program was 2013. So I have witnessed 2 cohorts of residents, one before the ECGME accreditation and one after. And that because we kept our data since beginning of the program, so that made us to reflect on these data as we will share later on. But how we were before the ECGME accreditation, we didn't have a CCC. Many of the assessments differ at different points. The resident will have exams, they will have assessments, completion of rotations, but the point of assessment is scattered. We set to discuss about the resident, if they are good, if they are bad. We, for example, bad in progression. So it is in the program meeting, but due to lack of FTE, the meeting was difficult to hold all the time as scheduled. I remember we had members from the Faculty of Medicine attending these meetings, and we struggled to get the meetings occurring on schedule. So there is a lot of informal, unstructured, and undocumented discussions. For faculty, supervisor, residents, data was archived by the name of the resident, by the evaluations separately research. So you can imagine maybe most of the room have went through accreditation, so you will know it. But I will say my experience, I felt relieved because I have the CCC chair. If people are asking, should the BD be the chair? Out of selfishness, I will say no, because you will have people covering a huge amount of work done, and even they will do it probably better than the program director, because they will be focused, they will follow things as scheduled. The BD will have the total picture to see. Learning tool, learning took a while, that's true. Maybe at the start I was chairing the CCC, but as we go, we took time until we reached to know what to do. Later, so one coordinator is responsible about the CC. That's very important. And now the data is more gathered around the performance of the residents. And it's around, we are more outcome oriented, more seeing about milestones, where they reach in their competency, rather than pass or fail. So ABA era started, and we wanted to see how the ABA, we learned through attending the faculty development. We attended the Ottawa conference in Abu Dhabi, and then it was an eye-opening, because we knew how to do, although we struggled for a few years, 3-4 years. We made the list of the ABA, we wanted to implement it. It's not practical, it is a lot, people will not do the evaluations. So the members became from 2014 until 2018, more comfortable about the milestones. Now, having the ABA, it was fine to navigate through things. Before going to the ABA, we needed a lot of data. So these are the listed source of data for the time. You can, it's nothing strange to most of you here. And not always observed data will be sufficient for you to judge ABA and milestones. For that, we were looking for deliberate sources of data about competency of residents, like OSCE, like, for example, workshops and procedures, role play during educational meetings, for example, oral examinations, projects that we give, quality projects. So to make things easier about the process of how we use this data, this is a slide that below reference. And maybe it is the simplest way to say, we start from observation, and observation of professional activity. It will make you better judge or trust a resident of trustable professional activity, and a number of one or more EBA will allow you to say this resident have reached this milestone or not. So this is a busy slide, but I think from day one in any residency program, we get a resident who is interested to do a lot of things. And following the discussion from undergraduate, for example, I hope that we have a document or a discussion with their undergraduate doctors where they say, you can trust this new resident R1 with such a thing. So we can have the resident at a better entrustment level, which is not by default. But when we get them in September 1st, it is by default. They start talking to the patients, they walk in the wards and clinics, and we start collecting the data. But the coordinator will start their dashboard. They will give them the blank templates of EBA, of milestones, of all of the assessment tools, and we'll start collecting the data. Maybe you can see how if this is making things simpler, because today the aim is not to give this. Maybe it will take weeks to go through how observation translates to EBA, translate to milestone. I trust that that will be done. But just to make the following slide easier, is that we have 6 clinics, and in 6 clinics we have 2 core faculty in each center. And each core faculty, they have a small group, which is, we call it the EARS, which is probably next slide. It is the evaluation and assessment of residents. And this makes, as I mentioned before, 2 meetings a year, it's not realistic. The EAR is continuously gathering data with the resident there. So they will see, for example, the EBA, managing acute problems. Did they attend, for example, a patient with MI or acute asthma, or they attended uncertainty iron deficiency anemia, for example. So they will start working on this. They meet together in couples or 3 of them. They can take the help of other members in the workplace, and these will they will complete a draft of the EBA for the resident. Of course, if we have electronic data gathered, that will make it easier. About the meetings, 2 times a year, when we have to complete the milestones, we have to have cluster of CCC. Maybe your program is small, you will have 1 meeting is enough, but because we have more than 60 residents, yes, we have 3 years program in the CGMA, but 4 years for NIHS. Still, we will, even if we graduate the resident CGMA program, but still we will include the seniors in the CCC discussion. So we will have a long time. We have also internal assessment that Dr. Moza, for example, CCC chair, will be busy calling for CCC to organize the schedule for the next 3 months, then to have meetings after completing the assessment days, and to take decision if there is a remediation needed or resident on probation. So it is a continuous all through the year work. So the ABA that we have used, just to share our experience, to start with, we get the ABA from different specialty. We had 150 ABA from different specialty, but we couldn't do it. And that was to get it stagnating in the first few years. But from 2018, when we at least somehow know what to do, we use the Family Medicine Generic ABA, which is from the Association of Family Medicine Residency Directors. It is very much applicable to our practice, and that's an example, for example, and they have a lot of documents that support how we can use it. And this is our master Excel sheet for each resident. So the resident will have his ABA done, evaluated, and then archived. Same copy, we will continue for the next period for the assessment of the ABA. You can see in the left side, this is the ABA, and it is mapped to the milestones. We didn't do that. Usually end users will not do the milestones and or the ABA or the mapping even. It is already done from experts, body CGME, your specialty associations, and we have went through it, applied in our setting. It worked. So we added to it a few ABA extra to 20, which are basic, because we receive residents who are different in their, we don't know about them. So these are basic ABA, like perform history examination, give differential counseling. And this is helpful because you don't go to specialty ABA if the basic ABA they are not reached by the resident. This is how it is mapped with the resources of the data resources there. I agree with the previous discussion that we don't work with numbers. It's better to have narrative assessment. But for this type of, you can see that, for example, patient care, managing acute problems. This is the milestone number 1. So in the end, we can average it to the end, and it will average the EBA. And in the CCC, we'll say, for example, Aisha is 2.5. We can keep it 2.5 because this is a summary of an assessment in the ABA. But maybe Dr. Amal will say, but I have seen her manage acute MI excellent, and she was very competent. I don't agree it is 2.5. So we exchange evidence that can decrease or increase or decrease the judgment. So we discuss it, and that's how we complete the milestones, and we post it. That's the milestone, either mid-year or end of the year. So as I mentioned, this is informative, but it could be different way people do it differently. Just to highlight a final lesson learned and the outcome. Decisions need to be information translated as from the different sources, as I mentioned just now. Competency decisions have periodicity. It's not like, for example, 3 years done, graduate. You have to have decisions in a certain times to assess competency and promotion, progress for the resident. Early decisions are helpful because you will plan remediation, but you will not have a lot of data. Time run quickly because, for example, 6 months, then 6 months, then 6 months, and then the resident, you will have them. But although it is not as good, but it's better to take early actions. Later decisions will have very much data, and you have look what. It's not uncommon, for example, to say how I didn't see that from the beginning, but because things get together, then you will see it very clearly. Sometimes residents they show things suboptimal, low level, but when you put it all together, then you. But better late than never. So integrated performance rather than sporadic. That's the whole idea about the milestones, and I think that's how we. There is a lot of what was shared by our colleagues before presentations. I just want to highlight, it's good if you are different, coming from different in opinions, for example, heterogeneity, group size, the larger, the better. Group understanding, shared mental work, for shared mental model. This is important because, for example, with time, we just don't need to talk. For example, we have to review ABA or milestone for a resident. We will say, for example, he's fine. Looking at the dashboard you have just seen, he's fine means that he achieved all the. So we understand each other when we judge from the data that we have seen. So we trust each other that we have reviewed enough data to make such judgment. And even at the workplace, we will be having the same things looking for it in the resident. And that's part of the shared mental model. Highlight privacy is extremely important in our setting. So it happens that, for example, discussions in the CCC moved outside to the resident. They said that and that about you. So you need to choose your members very well. There need to be barriers between residents and educators. Time factor, you have to manage small meetings better than one big that nobody want to go back to it again. So smaller meetings is better. The teams made all the difference during the last 3 years, where you just get to put the meeting and call Dr. Mariam, is she there? For example, she does not need to attend everything if, for example, it's not her resident under discussion. Try to verify, validate the information you get. Misleading information can get the work of the CCC badly. Technology can help. We have faculty development will stress on that. Reflection through the research is important, as you will see in a minute. Resident involvement is extremely important. Now I can say that our core faculty, they are aware about all of this. Residents, they are starting. Will admit it. EBAs are new, and we want to hold this to get the engagement of the resident, and this is a working area for us. This is tips about the CCC, about the outcome. As I mentioned earlier, we compared earlier cohort to later cohort. What we can say, what we can see is that, maybe this slide will tell better, is that in the cohort before ACGME accreditation, you can see that in training exam, which is a surrogate indicator of how good they will do in the certification exam. They are at a level of R2 for after the accreditation. So what happened? Is it the accreditation? We have so many things changed. I was not alone. That's a big change. I have a bigger team. There was structure in the program. We had all what we have mentioned, milestones. We can talk about competency, verbalizing the stages where the resident reached. So you can see these changes. As well, we have seen that, we have seen that milestones, it seems I'm going, okay. Here, you can see that the certification or the in-training exam is correlating, the year 4 in-training exam is correlating very well with the early milestones. Just one conclusion, no, it is busy slide, but if you have done the milestones for year 2, for example, if they are doing poorly, that most likely they will do poorly in the certification exam. So that's another importance of the milestones, that they can predict the future progress of the resident, which is very important. So due to time, the accreditation standard requires structure, process, clinical competency, as you can all appreciate. Quantitative, qualitative data for both committees are different points from different sources need to be processed by committees. Similar to others like Colombo and others, milestone data offer a valid, reliable predictive tool, and that's what we have found. Local factors are important. Maybe the conclusion slide. The final slide. Yes. As you can appreciate, introduction of accreditation is associated with increasing resident achievement, and that's the main factor for residency program. And our work in progress is EBA, and I hope that with its implementation, outcome for the resident will be even better, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. For second time, we'll give you questions for the panel discussion. So our next speaker is Dr. James Aragi. Dr. James is the President and Chief Executive Officer of this ACGE International. He completed his Bachelor of Science and Medical Doctorate degree at Canada University in Rhode Island, USA. He completed training in internal medicine, cardiology, and nuclear medicine at Washington University, St. Louis. St. Louis, the National Institute of Health, and Yale University School of Medicine. Before joining ACGE, Dr. Aragi served as a program director for the cardiology fellowship and as a director of graduate medical education at Brown University and Rhode Island Hospital. He's a professor of medicine, diagnostic imaging, and medical science at France, and received several faculty awards for teachings over the 2 decades. He's mentored a lot of residents and fellows, and he has published over 70 peer-reviewed publications and has delivered over 130 national or international invited lecturers. He joined ECGME recently in September 2021. Welcome, Dr. Alan.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind invitation. This is my first opportunity to have the microphone. I'll speak this afternoon a little bit more about ACGMEI initiatives and a little bit more of our framework and what we've learned in this journey of providing accreditation across the world. My task right now is very limited. I just want to introduce one very targeted concept since we're talking about milestones. I wanted to introduce something relatively new that's available to us that we hear is important to our stakeholders. I also, since this is my first time up here, I wanted to take this opportunity to congratulate Dr. Al-Khani and the whole team for putting this together. I'll admit that when we were initially thinking and when I was initially trying to help with this conference, I was skeptical because there wasn't much time to put this all together, and we weren't sure about the interest and what have you. But wow, this has been this obviously is a success from the very beginning, and is probably be predictive of future success over the years ahead. I anticipate growth. Yeah, it exceeded my expectations. I'll admit. So I'm just going to, again, briefly, I only want to provide you with an awareness. I want to just make you aware of something that's available on the ACGME site. I credit Laura Edgar, but she can only have so much time on the stage, so I have to limit a little bit for helping me put together some slides. So this is about the clinical educator milestones. We've been listening about it, we've been hearing about milestones that are for the residents or fellows and all the things that you can do with them. But we actually, the ACGME has clinical educator milestones. And why and what? Because we hear from the community that the community wants to know how you define a competent clinical educator. Faculty, right, the folks that teach our residents and fellows. How is it different than a competent clinician? We think in terms of, sometimes we think that the two are the same. They're not exactly the same, right? The clinical clinician in the educator arena who's in that environment needs somewhat different skills than a clinician who is practicing in a different environment directly with patients without learners. How should clinician educators be assessed? We have heard in just going around our different partners across the world, this resonates with most of you that there's a need to answer these questions. A little bit of background. The clinical educator milestones are designed to aid clinical educators in their professional development. So part of the utility, we believe, or the vision we had is as professional development, a little bit different than but related to the milestones that are used for residents and fellows. Obviously, we don't have a clinical competency committee for faculty. Maybe we should, I don't know. But their utility can be driven by the faculty member themselves. They're designed for educators to use across the continuum of medical education. Hopefully, they're general enough so that you can apply the context both of the hospital or the region of the country, but also the context of the specialty. So they're meant to be this general and then applied in context of the various contexts that they may be used. They can be used as a self-assessment tool to improve specific sub-competencies or to develop skills in areas that faculty members are hoping to develop further. For example, maybe one faculty member who's aspires to be a program director. You've seen the construct and you're more than familiar with the construct. It's the same construct basically for the, and now in the next slide, I'm just going to provide a brief example. Again, the purpose of it, literally, in this 5 minutes, is to just provide you a taste and an awareness that these exist, so you can look on our website and begin to just explore the contract. So these are all the sub-competencies that are covered in the clinical educator milestones: reflective practice and commitment to personal growth, well-being, recognition and mitigation of bias, commitment to professional responsibilities, teaching and faculty learning, et cetera, learner assessment, feedback. And then you'll notice even in the bottom right, there are some things about administrative skills, leadership skills, change management. These are more the competencies that relate to leadership and administration. And different combinations of these may be relevant to an individual faculty member. An individual faculty member to be perfect in all of these would be a super person. So an individual faculty member may have development or seek development and aspirational goals in selected areas here, depending on their interests and their role in the program. On the right-hand side is just a snapshot of where these fit on the ACGME site. I don't think we yet have a link. This is on the ACGME US site. I don't think we can easily link it on the ACGME I site. Although once you're on one, you can probably navigate to the other. This is just provided one random set of milestones in one competency, just to show you an example that they look at. If you just look at it, and it looks the same as the formatting for the milestones that you just heard about for learners. This one is on educational theory and practice, on learner in that category, learner assessment, and it provides a stream from level 1 to level 5. Similar to the milestones that you heard about so far, there are examples on our website of the manual that can be used, and these can be customized. So if you want to use these clinical educator milestones and then begin to set the framework and provide examples that are specific to your local context or specialty, the guide can be modified in the same way that it can be done for the milestones for internal medicine, pediatrics, etc. Same construct. That's the only, I just wanted to give you a sense of their existence. And finally, they can be used in a number of ways. Again, I mentioned what the primary intention is. They can be used for faculty development activities. They can be used to enhance assessment and feedback to the faculty member, and hopefully then that faculty member enhances their performance in the clinical learning environment in their role as educators. To be used, importantly, I think one of the major things that I think that can be helpful is that they can be used for self-assessment. Faculty member could look to these milestones and basically in an introspective way look at what they're doing, what they want to develop in their own professional lives, and use these as a guide. And that's really all I'm going to say about the clinical educator milestones. Again, this is new territory for us, new ground, but I think it has a lot of potential. But it's really up to the faculty member, the program, or the department about how these could be used. I do think that because these are non-clinical milestones, that there's broad applicability across the world, in the United States, outside the United States, as written, probably